The Vecthar descended on Earth like an unstoppable storm. They weren't conquerors in the traditional sense. There was no grand invasion, no armies storming cities or battles fought in the sky. The Vecthar didn't want to rule. They wanted to hunt. For sport, and humans were their prey. It started slowly, with small outposts of human settlements vanishing overnight. At first, the world thought it was some kind of terrible natural disaster, storms, earthquakes, or even a plague. But the truth was far worse. The Vecthar came in silence, their ships cloaked in the skies, and their hunters prowled the ruins of once thriving cities. They wore the skin of apex predators, a terrifying blend of reptilian and insectoid features, with cruel eyes that saw no value in life except as a challenge to their superiority. To the Vecthar, humanity was a game where humans were the quarry and the aliens were the supreme hunters. Armed with advanced technology, they effortlessly overwhelmed Earth's defenses. Military might, national forces, none of it mattered. The Vecthar hunted with no remorse, capturing humans in the wild and forcing them into arenas where they were given only the faintest hope of survival. Some were killed for sport, others set loose in the wilderness, only to be stalked by the alien hunters as they watched from afar. Captain Elise Carter sat in the shadows of an abandoned building, scanning the horizon. Her face was drawn, her eyes hard with determination. She had seen the devastation firsthand. Her unit, once part of a large military force, had been decimated by the Vecthar in the early days of the invasion. Now, only a handful of survivors remained. She wasn't just a soldier anymore. She was the leader of what was left of humanity's resistance. "We're not dead yet," she muttered under her breath, tightening her grip on her weapon. "And we're not going to be." Her group, a small band of survivors, was huddled in a hidden enclave beneath the ruins of a once proud city. They had no resources, no weapons, and little hope. But they had each other, and they had a fire that the Vecthar had underestimated. The leader of the alien hunters, a monstrous creature known as Raxtor, had taken particular interest in Alyssa's people. He had learned that humans, while weak compared to his kind, had a fire inside them, a resistance that made hunting them more challenging. That challenge was what drew him in, the thrill of the hunt. For weeks now, Alyssa's team had been gathering intelligence on their alien tormentors. They learned the patterns of the Vecthar, how they hunted, where they gathered, and most importantly, how to stay one step ahead. They couldn't take the aliens head-on, not yet, but they could adapt. They could survive. The night was the only time they moved. The Vecthar hunted in the daylight, their advanced vision giving them an advantage. Under the cover of darkness, humans had a chance. A slim one, but a chance nonetheless. Alyssa's mind raced as she mentally prepared the next phase of their operation. They were going to strike back, not with brute force, but with strategy. It wasn't about surviving any longer. It was about proving to the Vecthar that humanity was not just prey. They were fighters. And one day they would make the aliens regret ever choosing Earth as their hunting ground. As the night deepened, Elise signaled for her team to move out. Every step was calculated, every action precise. They didn't need to fight the Vecthar today. Today, they needed to survive. And tomorrow, when the time was right, they would make their move. The hunt had begun, but it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Elise Carter stood at the edge of the ruined city, gazing out over the desolate landscape. The once bustling metropolis was now little more than a graveyard of shattered glass and crumbling concrete. Fires still burned in the distance, reminders of the alien assault that had shattered civilization. But amidst the destruction, there was a flicker of life, a small defiant spark that refused to be extinguished. Her team, a ragtag group of survivors, had gathered in the shadows of the ruins, preparing for another dangerous mission. Every day was a battle, not just against the Vecthar, but against the crushing weight of hopelessness that threatened to consume them. It was hard to keep fighting when everything seemed lost, but Elise refused to let that happen. She couldn't afford to let her people fall into despair. Not when the Vecthar were so close to wiping them out entirely. The group had grown smaller over the weeks, some falling in skirmishes with the aliens, others claimed by the brutal conditions of life in hiding. But they were still here, still alive. And that meant there was hope. The Vecthar had thought they were nothing more than prey, but they had underestimated humanity's will to survive. "We need to move quickly," Elise said, her voice low but firm. "The Vecthar won't wait forever." Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Marcus Hill, stepped forward, a grim expression on his face. "We don't have enough supplies for a full-scale operation. Our last stockpile of ammunition is running low, and we barely have enough food to last another week." Elise nodded. She'd known that this would come. Resources were scarce, and they couldn't afford to waste any more time. But they had no choice. The Vecthar were relentless. They wouldn't stop until every human on Earth was either dead or captured. The only chance they had was to hit back hard. And now, "We'll make do with what we have," Elise replied, her tone unwavering. "This isn't about resources. It's about using what we've got and outsmarting them. We don't need to defeat the Vecthar in a straight fight. We just need to make them think we're more trouble than we're worth." It was a dangerous strategy, one that relied on human ingenuity and deception rather than brute strength. But it was the only one they had. The Vecthar may have the superior weapons and technology, but humans had something more valuable: adaptability. Every time the aliens thought they had cornered them, the survivors found a way to slip through the cracks and escape. Every time the Vecthar grew complacent, the humans struck back, often with terrifying results. Elise's team was becoming more proficient in the art of survival. They had learned to track the Vecthar, study their movements, and anticipate their actions. The once feared predators were no longer invincible. Every time they hunted a human, they left behind a trail of clues that Elise and her team had learned to read like a map. And with each successful escape, the humans grew more confident, more capable. "Tonight's mission is simple," Elise said, her voice gaining strength. "We're going after one of their scout parties. They'd been spotted near the old refinery on the outskirts of the city. We'll hit them fast and hard, take what supplies we can, and make sure they know we're not afraid anymore." There was a murmur of agreement from the group. The survivors had grown to respect Elise's leadership, even when hope seemed distant. They trusted her to make the hard decisions, to guide them through the darkness. As the team prepared for the mission, Elise couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. They were no longer just hiding. They were fighting back, and while it wasn't much, it was enough to give her something she hadn't had in a long time: belief. The night was their ally. The shadows were their sanctuary. And as the team moved out under the cover of darkness, Elise knew one thing for certain: they weren't done yet. The hunt was far from over. And soon, the Vecthar would learn that humanity was no longer the prey. They were the predators now. The night air was thick with tension as Elise and her team crept through the ruins. The streets were silent, save for the distant echoes of alien patrols and the occasional rattle of a dying city. Every step had to be measured, every move calculated. The Vecthar were out there, hunting. But tonight, the tables would turn. "Stay sharp," Elise whispered, her voice barely audible over the crunch of broken glass underfoot. "We hit fast, hit hard, and vanish. No mistakes." Her team nodded, eyes alert, hands gripping weapons that had long since lost their shine, but still held the weight of their purpose. The mission was simple but dangerous. A Vecthar scout party had been spotted near the old refinery, and it was their chance to strike. A chance to show the aliens they weren't the only ones who could hunt. The refinery loomed ahead, its jagged silhouette cutting against the sky, a place of twisted metal and forgotten machines. It was here, in this forsaken place, that they would make their stand. The Vecthar scouts would be patrolling in pairs, looking for any sign of movement in the ruins. But the humans had learned how to move in the shadows. They knew how to be ghosts in the dark. Elise signaled for the group to spread out, moving into position around the refinery. Her heart pounded in her chest, not from fear, but from anticipation. For so long, they had been nothing but prey. Tonight, that changed. Tonight, they would strike first. The plan was simple. Disable the scouts' communication devices, take out the sentries, and steal any supplies they could find. They would leave no trace. They had to. If they did this right, the Vecthar would never know what hit them. It didn't take long before the first alien appeared, tall, armored, and armed with a weapon that could burn through steel. It was one of the Vecthar's elite scouts, a creature whose senses were sharp enough to detect the slightest shift in the air. Elise crouched low, watching the alien as it stalked the perimeter, its glowing eyes scanning the darkness. Now, she breathed. Without hesitation, Marcus, her second in command, moved like a shadow, silently approaching the Vecthar from behind. The alien never saw him coming. With a swift, precise motion, Marcus struck, disabling the alien's weapon and knocking it to the ground. It let out a strangled hiss, but before it could raise any alarm, Elise was on it, her knife flashing in the darkness. One quick slash, and the creature was silenced. The team moved in swiftly, gathering the fallen scout's gear and ransacking its pack for supplies. It wasn't much. Some medical supplies, a few rations, and a set of advanced Vecthar communication devices. But it was more than they had before. The victory was small, but it was theirs, and it was a taste of what was to come. Elise stood over the fallen scout, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Her heart still raced, but it wasn't from fear. It was from the rush of winning, of knowing they had done the impossible. For the first time in months, she felt something stirring deep inside her, a flicker of hope. "We did it," Marcus said, his voice low with disbelief. "We actually did it." Elise nodded, her expression hardening. "This is just the beginning. We don't stop here. We don't let them think we're weak." Her eyes scanned the horizon, watching for any sign of more Vecthar patrols. The night was still young, and they couldn't afford to get complacent. But the truth was clear now. The Vecthar weren't invincible. They could be defeated. They could be outsmarted. As the team disappeared into the shadows, their hearts lifted by their success, Elise allowed herself one moment of triumph. It wasn't much, but it was a start, a small victory, a glimmer of hope, a sign that humanity wasn't going to lie down and die without a fight. And the Vecthar, they had just learned that Earth's prey was no longer willing to be hunted. The game had changed, and this time, humanity would be the hunters. The victory had been sweet, but it was brief. The Vecthar had taken note. Elise could feel it in the air, the growing tension, the sense that something was about to snap. The moment the first alien scout had fallen, the Vecthar knew that humanity was no longer merely prey. They had become a threat, and the aliens didn't take kindly to threats. Within days of their first success, the Vecthar retaliated with unrelenting force. Patrols became more frequent, more aggressive. No longer content to play their usual game, the aliens escalated their efforts, deploying more advanced weaponry and using their most brutal assets, the genetically engineered hunting beasts. These creatures, towering and savage, were designed for one thing: to hunt down and kill humans with terrifying efficiency. Elise's group had barely managed to escape their first run-in with one of these beasts. The creature, a massive hybrid of predator and machine, had torn through the ruins with an unsettling grace, its eyes glowing red as it searched for its quarry. The Vecthar had trained it to track humans with terrifying precision, and it didn't stop until it had either killed or cornered its prey. Elise had seen the terror in the eyes of her people when the beast had first appeared. She had seen the way they froze, paralyzed with fear, but she refused to let that fear consume her. She pushed her team harder, taught them to fight with the same ferocity they had learned to survive. They had to adapt. The Vecthar's retaliation was meant to crush their spirits, but Elise wouldn't allow it. "This isn't the time to hide," Elise said as they gathered around a makeshift map in the abandoned safe house. "We have to keep hitting them where it hurts. They think they can break us with these creatures, but they're wrong. They're making a mistake." She slammed a fist onto the map. "We know their weaknesses now, and we're going to exploit them." Her second-in-command, Marcus, stared at the map, his face etched with concern. "Elise, we're not ready for this. Those beasts, they're too strong. If we go after them, we're dead." Elise met his gaze, her eyes hard. "We've been dead since the Vecthar arrived. If we don't fight back, if we don't show them that we're not afraid, then we've already lost." The team had no choice but to follow her lead. There was no retreat, no surrender. The world they had known was gone, and they had to find a new way to survive. They couldn't hide forever. It was time to turn the tables, to make the Vecthar feel the sting of what they had unleashed. Over the next few days, they scouted, studying the behavior of the Vecthar's new hunting creatures. They learned where the beasts were most active, where they fed, and most importantly, where they slept. It wasn't an easy task, and there were close calls. But Elise's team was relentless. They adapted quickly, learning to work with the environment, using it as a weapon against the invaders. The creatures, though powerful, were not invincible. They had one flaw. Despite their genetic enhancements, they lacked the cunning and adaptability of humans. They could be outwitted. And that was exactly what Elise and her team planned to do. But the Vecthar weren't just relying on their beasts. They had begun to tighten their grip on the remaining human strongholds, rounding up survivors in search of new hunting grounds. It wasn't just about hunting anymore. It was about eradicating any hope humanity had left. Elise felt the pressure mounting. Every moment, every decision was more critical than ever. If they were going to survive, they needed to strike back harder, smarter, and more decisively. The Vecthar had shown no mercy, and now it was their turn to learn the true cost of underestimating humanity. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the ruins, Elise gathered her team. The time for waiting was over. It was time to turn the tide. "We'll hit them where it hurts," she said, her voice low but full of fire. "We'll make them regret ever coming to Earth. Tonight, we fight back. No more running. No more hiding." Her people looked at her, a renewed sense of purpose filling their hearts. The Vecthar had made a mistake. They had made humanity desperate, and desperation had a way of turning the tide of war. As the team prepared for their next move, Elise knew one thing for sure. This war was far from over, but humanity was finally ready to show the Vecthar what it meant to be hunted. The Vecthar were growing frustrated. Their once unquestioned superiority had been rattled. For every blow they struck, humanity found a way to hit back. The alien hunters were used to dominating their prey without challenge. Now, they were facing an enemy that adapted, that learned, that fought with a resilience the Vecthar had not anticipated. And this, Elise knew, was only the beginning. The survivors, though battered and weary, had discovered something extraordinary during their last skirmishes. A hidden relic buried beneath the ruins of an ancient city. A signal emitter was a key to turning the tide of the war. The relic wasn't just an old piece of technology. It was a human artifact, a remnant of a long-forgotten civilization, and it had the power to disrupt the Vecthar's advanced weaponry. Elise had heard whispers of its existence, a strange piece of history that had somehow survived the Vecthar's initial onslaught. It was believed to be an ancient device, long before the Vecthar ever set foot on Earth, that could disrupt electromagnetic frequencies. The survivors, desperate for any advantage, made it their mission to find it. And against all odds, they succeeded. "This is it," Marcus said, holding up the old, rusted device. The relic was roughly the size of a small suitcase, its surface covered in strange, intricate carvings. The team had already discovered that it had the potential to disable the Vecthar's technology, something that Elise had never dared dream of. If they could activate it, it could neutralize the aliens' weapons and communication systems, at least temporarily. "Does it really work?" Elise asked, her eyes scanning the strange device with a mixture of disbelief and hope. Marcus shrugged, his face lit with cautious optimism. "We've got one way to find out." The survivors didn't waste time. They took the relic to the heart of the alien-held territory, a place where the Vecthar's forces were concentrated, their supply lines humming with activity. The plan was simple: infiltrate the area, plant the signal emitter, and watch as the Vecthar's technology faltered. As they approached the heavily guarded stronghold, the atmosphere shifted. There was a sense of quiet dread, the kind that settles over a battlefield before the first shots are fired. Every member of the team knew what was at stake. This was their most dangerous mission yet. The odds were stacked against them. But for the first time in what felt like forever, the humans were the ones who had the upper hand. They weren't simply surviving. They were about to strike a blow that could change everything. The least signaled for the team to spread out, moving swiftly through the shadows, avoiding the alien patrols that scoured the area. The plan was working. So far, they had avoided detection, slipping past the Vecthar's surveillance without incident. They reached the heart of the stronghold undetected, the signal emitter in hand. "This is it," Elise whispered, her voice tense but steady. "Get ready." With one final glance to ensure everything was in place, Marcus activated the device. The world seemed to hold its breath as a low hum filled the air. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, like a wave crashing against the shore, the alien technology flickered. Their weapons faltered. Communication systems went silent. The Vecthar were momentarily blind. The humans seized the opportunity, launching a rapid assault on the vulnerable alien forces. The Vecthar, caught off guard, scrambled to regain control, but it was too late. The humans were in motion, striking quickly, efficiently, with a new sense of purpose. The signal emitter had worked, and for the first time in a long while, the tide of battle was in their favor. It wasn't just a victory. It was a statement. The humans weren't helpless after all. They had a weapon the Vecthar couldn't counter: ingenuity. As the Vecthar forces regrouped, Elise stood amidst the chaos, her heart pounding with exhilaration. She could feel the shift in the air. The balance of power was beginning to tilt. This wasn't the end, but it was the beginning of something bigger. The Vecthar had underestimated them, and now humanity had shown them that they would never be prey again. The signal emitter had given humanity its first taste of victory, but Elise knew it wasn't enough to change the course of the war on its own. The Vecthar were resilient, and they would adapt quickly. The device had disrupted their technology for only a short time, but that brief window had been enough to prove something crucial. The Vecthar were not invincible. Their arrogance had been their weakness, and humanity had found a way to exploit it. In the days that followed, the survivors moved quickly. They used the disruption of the Vecthar's technology to their advantage, striking at key targets, sabotaging alien supply lines, and hitting their command centers with deadly precision. Every successful strike fueled their growing momentum. Each victory, no matter how small, was another reminder that the Vecthar were not the unstoppable force they had once appeared to be. But as the humans pushed forward, they began to realize that the Vecthar were not merely hunting them. They were trying to crush them. The aliens were reeling, but they were also retaliating with renewed fury. The attacks grew more brutal, more frequent. Entire pockets of resistance were wiped out in a matter of hours. The Vecthar's elite forces, led by Raxtor himself, launched coordinated strikes to hunt down and eliminate any human survivors, leaving nothing but smoldering ruins in their wake. Elise's team had been one of the few to survive the Vecthar's counteroffensive. The days that followed were a blur of skirmishes, evasion, and loss. The relentless pursuit of Raxtor's forces weighed heavily on her, but the survivors kept fighting. They couldn't afford to stop. Not now. Not when they had already come so far. "We need a plan," Marcus said one evening as they huddled around a fire in their makeshift camp, their faces drawn from exhaustion. "We can't keep running forever. The Vecthar are closing in." Elise stared into the fire, her mind racing. She could feel the pressure building, the weight of their survival resting squarely on her shoulders. There was no easy answer, no quick fix to the war they were fighting. But one thing was clear: they couldn't afford to fight the Vecthar in the way they had been. The aliens were too powerful, too well-equipped. The direct confrontations were costing them too much. "Then it's time we turn the tables again," Elise said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty in her chest. "We need to hit them where it hurts most. We've taken their technology down once. Now we need to hit their supply chain, take out the source of their power." The team exchanged looks, the gravity of the plan settling in. It was a bold move, one that would carry immense risks. The Vecthar's supply lines were heavily guarded, their supply ships guarded by some of the most advanced military technology the aliens had at their disposal. But Alice's instincts told her this was the way forward. To win, they had to disrupt the Vecthar's control over Earth. It wasn't enough to simply fight them on the ground. They needed to strike at their heart. "Where do we start?" Marcus asked, his eyes scanning the maps spread out before them. Ellis pointed to a series of marked locations on the map. "Their main supply hub is located here, in the heart of their territory. It's a heavily fortified area, but it's not invulnerable. We've already seen signs of cracks in their defenses. If we can breach the perimeter, we can take out their main resource depot and disrupt their ability to resupply." The plan was risky, and the cost of failure would be high. But Elise knew that sometimes the greatest victories were born from the most dangerous gambles. The humans had already proven that they could surprise the Vecthar, and this time, they would do it again. Only this time, they would hit harder and faster than before. As the survivors made their preparations, Elise couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of something monumental. They were no longer simply fighting to survive. They were fighting for their future. And for the first time in a long while, she believed they could win. The Vecthar had underestimated humanity once. The next time, it would be their downfall. The night before the operation, Elise couldn't sleep. She paced back and forth in the darkened hideout, her mind replaying every detail of their plan, every possible outcome. Tomorrow, they would launch their most dangerous mission yet, deep into the heart of Vecthar-controlled territory. If they succeeded, it could cripple the alien invaders and tilt the balance of the war in humanity's favor. But if they failed, the consequences would be catastrophic. The weight of leadership pressed heavily on her. Her team had come to rely on her, and their lives depended on the choices she made. Every decision felt like a gamble, and this mission was no different. The Vecthar were ruthless, and their supply hub, the target of their assault, was one of the most heavily defended positions on Earth. The area was a fortress, surrounded by layers of alien patrols, automated defense systems, and traps that only the most seasoned hunters could avoid. Yet Alyssa's resolve was unshaken. If they were going to survive, they couldn't keep running. They had to take the fight directly to the Vecthar. It wasn't just about disrupting their supply lines. It was about showing the aliens that humanity was no longer prey. It was about making a statement that would echo across the galaxy. At dawn, the team gathered in the makeshift command center, their faces a mixture of fatigue and determination. The plan was clear, simple, but extremely risky. They would infiltrate the supply hub under the cover of darkness, disable the aliens' primary energy source, and set explosive charges to destroy their munitions depot. They would hit hard, hit fast, and then vanish into the night. Marcus stepped forward, holding a small bundle of maps and tech. "Everything's set. The route is clear, and the explosives are packed. We've got one shot at this." Elise nodded, her eyes scanning the team. They were tired, bruised, and battered from weeks of constant conflict, but there was fire in their eyes. They were no longer just survivors. They were fighters, warriors united by a single cause. For all the pain and loss, they had become a force to be reckoned with. "We stick together," Elise said, her voice firm. "No matter what happens, we don't leave anyone behind. We hit them hard. Then we get out. Once the mission is complete, We rendezvous at the extraction point. No heroics. Marcus gave her a grim smile. Understood. No heroics. With the final preparations made, the team set out under the cover of night. The Vecthar stronghold loomed ahead, a sprawling complex of alien technology and defenses. The air was thick with tension as the humans moved through the shadows, their movements silent and deliberate. The whole world seemed to hold its breath as they crept closer to the heart of the beast. Every step was calculated. They knew that detection meant instant death. They had to move fast and precise. The plan called for them to use the ruins around them for cover, slipping between abandoned buildings and natural obstacles. Their success depended on stealth. If they made it inside undetected, they could complete the mission and escape before the Vecthar realized what had happened. Hours passed, and the team finally reached the outskirts of the supply hub. It was a towering structure, a monolith of Vecthar engineering, its surface covered with shimmering energy shields and automated turrets. Guards patrolled the perimeter, their glowing eyes scanning the area for intruders. The team waited, watching the patrols, waiting for the right moment. Elise felt the cold sweat of anticipation running down her back. They were close now. So close. They only had a small window to breach the defenses and plant the explosives before the Vecthar realized something was wrong. One mistake, one slip, and the entire mission would be a failure. "Ready?" Marcus whispered, his voice steady despite the danger. Elise nodded. "On my mark." As the last patrol turned the corner, she gave the signal. In a blur of motion, the team surged forward, silently slipping past the patrols and breaching the outer perimeter of the supply hub. The next few minutes felt like an eternity as they moved deeper into the heart of the alien fortress, avoiding detection at every turn. Their target was clear, the energy core that powered the entire complex. If they could disable it, the entire hub would fall into disarray. As they reached the core, Alyssa's heart pounded in her chest. It was time. The countdown to their victory had begun. The Vecthar were about to learn the price of underestimating humanity. The energy core stood before them, a massive structure pulsing with an eerie alien light. It was the heart of the Vecthar stronghold, the lifeblood of their operations on Earth. Elise stared at it, knowing that the fate of humanity rested on this one critical moment. They had come so far, and now, they were about to deliver a blow that would send shockwaves through the alien forces. But the sense of urgency was undeniable. They had no time to waste. "Set the charges," Elise commanded, her voice low but firm. The team sprang into action, quickly placing the explosives around the core's vulnerable points. Marcus worked with mechanical precision, ensuring each charge was positioned perfectly, while the others kept a watchful eye on the surrounding area. The clock was ticking, and the Vecthar were relentless in their pursuit. "Charges set," Marcus said, stepping back to join the others. Elise nodded. "We've done what we came here to do. Now we get out." But before they could make their escape, a loud noise reverberated through the complex. An alarm. The Vecthar had detected something. The energy core's defenses flickered, and the sounds of alien patrols rushing toward their location filled the air. The moment of surprise was over. "Move. Now," Elise shouted. They ran, their footsteps echoing in the corridors of the alien facility. The Vecthar were closing in on them faster than they'd anticipated, their glowing eyes cutting through the shadows like predatory beams. But there was no turning back now. The charges had been set. The mission had been accomplished. They just had to make it out alive. Alyssa's mind raced as they sprinted toward the extraction point. She could hear the distant growls of the Vecthar hunting beasts echoing down the halls, their twisted forms now unleashed, and their hunger for human blood insatiable. The odds were against them. The Vecthar knew the layout of the facility far better than the humans did, and the escape route was fraught with danger. But they couldn't afford to slow down. Not now. Ahead, a door to an underground tunnel opened, the final route to their escape. Elise and her team dove into it, their bodies low to the ground as the first explosions rang out behind them, shaking the very foundation of the alien structure. The energy core had detonated, sending a shockwave through the Vecthar stronghold. The building groaned as its defenses faltered, and the aliens' coordinated response began to crumble. The tunnel was dark and narrow, the walls lined with the remnants of old human infrastructure. As they pushed forward, the sounds of the Vecthar's pursuit grew louder. The growls of their beasts echoed in the distance, and the hiss of alien weapons charging could be heard behind them. Alyssa's heart raced in her chest, but there was no time to think about fear. They had to keep moving. As they reached the end of the tunnel, an explosion ripped through the air above them. The Vecthar had launched a counterattack, but it was too late. The explosion shook the earth, and the tunnel entrance collapsed behind them, sealing the Vecthar off from their escape route. Elise and her team emerged into the open air, panting and covered in dirt and sweat. The sky was lit with the glow of distant fires from the Vecthar stronghold as the alien base crumbled under the weight of their sabotage. The survivors staggered into the safe zone, breathing heavily, but with a sense of victory pulsing through their veins. "We did it," Marcus whispered, a small smile breaking through his grim expression. Elise looked out over the battlefield, watching the Vecthar's stronghold burn. Their fight wasn't over, but this victory was a pivotal moment. The aliens had just learned that humanity could strike back, that they were capable of fighting back against the invaders who had once seen them as nothing more than prey. For the first time in a long while, Elise felt the spark of hope, a belief that they could win this war. Humanity was no longer afraid. The Vecthar had come to Earth to hunt. But now, they had become the hunted. As the team gathered, bruised but triumphant, Elise looked at each of them. They had fought not just for survival but for the future of their world. The war was far from over, but they had proven something crucial to the Vecthar. The tables had turned, and humanity was ready for whatever came next.